Hey YouTube, today we're going to be talking about safeties on handguns. And before we get started, I'm going to let you know none of these handguns here have anything in them. I've cleared them, and as I pick them up, I will show you there's nothing in them. So what's the topic for today? We're going to talk about safeties on handguns because it seems to be a subject that people have brought up in a couple of my past videos I've done here recently. So what we're going to talk about is what type of safeties are the best and when you should use a safety and if it's a good option for you. So what we're going to do is we're going to start on what started this topic up, and we're going to look at this Sig Sauer P320. Now, I did a couple videos here recently on this particular platform, the Sig 320, and this one has to be a 320 compact, just a normal plain Jane, and this one's chambered in 45 ACP. Now, this is a carry option for me. I carry this gun when I ride my motorcycle because it fits my hand good, and I draw it the best out of a shoulder holster that I wear underneath a vest when I'm riding my motorcycle. I like the length of the grip and the way you can draw it out of a shoulder holster. Now, a lot of people have complained about this gun over the years. This gun came out around 2014 or 15, somewhere around that time era. The reason this exists, this is a polymer frame striker fired gun, and this was Sig Sauer's submission to the United States military to replace the Beretta M9 as their sidearm. And when they first came out, there was a problem with these guns. Then people were saying they were not drop safe. And if you'll look at these guns very closely, and if you own one or you're looking at getting one, the thinner trigger is the one that they've upgraded. It's either been sent back as a voluntary recall, or it was made after like 2017 when they finally decided to change. Now, the problem with it was when you turn this gun here and it fell in a certain angle, they were said to have an accidental discharge, and Sig Sauer did acknowledge the problem. They asked everybody that had one, it was a voluntary recall, to send it in. They would upgrade the fire control group, and it fixed the problem. They acknowledged there was a problem, and they addressed it and they fixed it. Now, the second problem that people have with these things is they say that they will discharge on their own. Now, I do not personally believe that. I believe a handgun will not go off unless the one mechanism has been manipulated to make it go off, and that is the trigger. Now, first of all, when we look at any of these firearms, the most important safety on any of them is this right here, folks, your trigger finger. If you do not touch the trigger, the firearm should not go off. These manufacturers have a lot of liability that they have to deal with, and there's a lot of R&D that goes into these, and they're not going to release a weapon out that's just going to spontaneously fire. I don't believe it, and I'm never going to believe it, but I understand there's people out there that do believe this. I'm going to go over some of the safety features on this. If we look at the external of this, there absolutely is no safety features on it whatsoever. Zero. So when you take this gun and you chamber it, it is ready to go right now. The only way this gun's going to go off is if something gets inside the trigger guard and activates this trigger right here. Now, what Sig Sauer did not do on this gun is, if you look at some of the other ones, I'm going to use an example. There'll be a little mechanism here built onto the trigger that has to be activated for the trigger to go off. Sig Sauer does not do that. But what that does for the Sig Sauer gun, and it makes an absolutely exceptional trigger for a striker fired gun. There's not a lot of sponginess, there's not a lot of take up, and this trigger is very crisp. Now, is that a problem? It's not a problem for me, but I understand there's a lot of people that are not willing to accept the amount of risk that some others do, and if you get a very good holster and you keep this thing in the holster, nothing, let's say my hand is the holster, nothing can get in this trigger guard, and this gun should never go off. There's no kind of external hammer, nothing. Now, if you just take this gun and put it in your gym shorts and your keys or something gets in here and gets this, well, of course it's going to go off, folks, and that's not the firearm's fault. The firearm was built to be carried in a holster where this whole trigger guard and everything is protected, where the gun will never go off. Other than that, there is no other type of external safety on this gun. It is drop safe, but there is no external safeties on it, and you have to understand that as this is the gun that you choose to carry around. It is not a bad gun whatsoever. It gets a bad rap because it is a mainstream company. Sig Sauer is a major firearm producer in the world, and when one bad thing happens, it makes the national news. And there's been examples of this for a lot of products for these high-end mainstream companies. P320 has no external safeties on it whatsoever. So if you're looking to buy a firearm and safety is a concern of yours, this one's going to be one that you might want to steer away if you want to put some type of external safety to keep this from going off, or if you're worried about something getting in here on the trigger guard, this is going to be the least one that you want to choose. But if you handle a firearm how you're supposed to handle it, this is a great option. Now we're going to move into the next one, and this is a Glock, and this is the one that I happen to carry every single day of my life. This is a Glock 30S, not to be confused with a Glock 30. The 30S means it has a slimmer slide on it. It is built on the regular double-stacked 45 ACP frame. This holds 10 rounds plus 1 in the chamber and has a thin slide on it. I think this is absolutely the best carry gun that has ever been produced by any manufacturer whatsoever. A lot of people think I hate on Glocks, but I do not. The length of this grip right here is very easy to conceal, and I have pretty large hands, and all 3 of my fingers fit on the bottom of it. Now let's look at some of the safety features on this gun. It is also drop safe. Glock is the one that came out with the polymer frame striker fired platform. They're the original ones. They've been doing it for 40 years now, and they are very reliable. Now, if you look up real close, if you see this little area right here, this is an external safety. That has to be activated in order for this trigger to go off. So it gives it a little bit of extra security. If something wants to get in here, if it doesn't activate this, the trigger will not go off. And I will try and show you. If I grab this trigger without pulling that little thing, I cannot get this thing to go off. But if I activate that little thing, that's when the trigger will go off. So this is a little bit, this gives you a little bit of extra step for having a safe firearm. If you were to, in the situation where you were to put this in a purse or something like that, it's a lot less likely to go off than the Sig Sauer over here. I don't recommend ever carrying a firearm without being in any type of holster anyway. But if there is a situation that arises where you have to carry a firearm without it being in a holster, this one would be a little bit more safe than the Sig Sauer. Now, the Sig Sauer, there was a lawsuit that came about that just got settled here within the past 6 months, and a guy was walking down the stairs and said his firearm just went off. Now, when he was cross-examined on the stand, he admitted that he had him in a pair of gym shorts. He was going down the stairs and something manipulated this trigger, and that's why it went off. Now, I don't think that's Sig Sauer's liability or anything like that. I don't think they're liable for that at all, but he did, in all reality, win the lawsuit. It was some millions of dollars, and now he's a millionaire because he was carrying a weapon improperly and it went off. But I'm not an attorney, and I don't get into other people's business. I'm just telling you that that's why the weapon went off. Nobody's ever been able to duplicate this gun discharging under any type of testing controlled situation and make it randomly discharged without something happening with this trigger mechanism right here. Now we're going to go into the next one, and this is a Taurus G3C. This is a very popular gun amongst mostly new firearm owners or even veteran firearm owners because of the cost of it. Now, some of the safety features it has on it, it has the same type of little mechanism on the trigger that has to be activated in order for this gun to go off. If I do not have that depressed, I could not get this trigger to go off. But once that goes off, it will fire, folks. But what this one also has, it has a added safety on it. It has a thumb safety that goes up on top. So when you have that pulled, this thing will not activate whatsoever. The slide will not move back, and it will not activate whatsoever. Now, for those people who are who insist on having a safety, an actual external safety on a gun, that they don't feel comfortable carrying a gun without a safety on it, this might be a good option. And there's several of them out there that make these guns that have an external safety on them. I choose not to use the safety on a gun unless it's a platform that requires you using the safety, and we'll get into that here in a second. So if they would have offered this gun without this safety on the side, that would have been the one that I would have owned. But you have to understand, you have to train with stuff like this. This is going to be what you rely on your life. So if you're carrying it with the safety on and you unholster this, first thing you need to remember is the first step is you have to take the safety off to get the weapon serviceable, being able to be used. But this is a great option. If somebody wanted an external safety on it, this is a great gun to have. You can use it with safety or without. And if I was to carry this gun, if I use this as my carry gun, I would leave it in the fire position all the time, because I knew it has this added extra safety right here on the trigger, and I knew it's drop safe. Now, we're going to move on to the next one, and this is a Sig P220 carry elite, and this is chambered in 45 ACP. Now this one people do not talk about as much, but there is, if you look around on this gun here, all the sides, there is no external safety whatsoever on it. And I'm going to explain to you why. This is a double action, single action gun. So the way you would carry this gun is you would chamber a round in the chamber right here, and the hammer is cocked. Now, what people fail to understand is in single action, there's very little movement of the trigger. See, it pulls the trigger back. I'm gonna release this and show you. If you see how far forward this trigger is, when this gun is cocked, the trigger comes all the way back. So there's a lot less movement required to make this go off, which makes it extremely sensitive. And if you have this not in a holster or anything, if anything gets in here and manipulates this thing will go off. I mean, it's gonna go off. It's got a fairly light trigger on it. It's about a 5-pound trigger on it. So the way that Sig Sauer came up with is you chamber your round and the hammer is cocked, and they felt that wasn't safe to carry that around just like this. And so they installed what they call a decocker. This lever right here actually drops this hammer down and rests it where it's not on the firing pin. If you'll look on the inside here, the firing pin is mounted inside the frame. And when you do this decocker, I'm going to try and do this real slow, it leaves that firing pin still exposed and the hammer is not resting on it. So if you hit this right here, it will not touch the firing pin. Therefore, the gun will not go off. So you carry it around like that, decocked, one's in the chamber, and when you pull it out, the first pull is going to be double action on this, and it's going to be quite a heavy pull as compared to when you're shooting this thing single action. And that's actually a good thing, folks. It's not such a sensitive trigger on it, and your first pull is going to be a little heavy. You have time to think, do I want to take the shot or anything? And it's pretty safe, but other than that, there is no kind of button, any kind of thumb safety or anything that's going to keep the slide from moving back or the trigger from being able to operate. This is a great carry option. The reason people don't hear a lot about these in the news is this was never in competition with the Glock, and people love Glocks, and I get it, they're very good guns. I carry one myself, but there are other options out there that are sometimes even better. This one was not in direct competition with the Glock, so you don't hear much about it. The P320 is in direct competition with the Glock, and it actually won. It passed all the military safety standards, all that, and it beat out Glock, and this is now the sidearm of the United States military, which a lot of people don't realize the United States military requires there be an external safety on every weapon that they take into their arsenal. And so Sig, when they presented their example, it has a little thumb safety on the side as well as Glock. Glock, when they presented their example to them, they had a little thumb safety right here. The military required it or they wouldn't even look at it. So when Glock gave their example, they had to put a little safety on the outside also. Like I said, you cannot buy a Glock in the civilian market with the safety on them, because Glock, which a lot of people think are the end all to all striker fire guns, don't feel that it's necessary. The only reason they added it is the military required it. So we'll move on to the next one, and this is a 1911. This one happens to be a Wilson Combat Professional 1911. It has a shorter slide and a full-size frame. Now the reason I'm using this one as an example in this is you have to use a safety with the 1911, and let's go through this for a second. So you would chamber this round, and you would chamber it in here, and the same with the Sig, you're going to have the hammer cocked. Well, a 1911 has an extremely light, crisp, and very well working trigger. It's the best trigger you're ever going to see on a handgun, and I'm going to show you. There's this much take up, and with this particular one, it's about a 3-pound trigger. So if you were carrying this around with this like this, and it was not in a holster, and something got in here and manipulated a trigger, it would be pretty easy for this thing to go off, you know, just touching it like this. But let's go into this a little bit further, deeper with the 1911. 1911 gets a lot of bad rap from new firearm people or people that haven't been around as long as I have, and they think this gun is completely outdated and they think it's unsafe. A lot of people that don't know about firearms will see somebody carrying this gun like this and say, I can't believe they're carrying that with that hammer cocked back like that. Well, the striker fired guns are all cocked too. You just don't see the internal parts. It's ready to hit the primer. But what you have to do on this 1911 is you have to use a safety. So you have a thumb safety on where it will not let the slide work and it will not let the trigger work whatsoever. And that keeps that from being able to operate. But let's go into this a little bit deeper. If you take this thumb safety off and you try and work this trigger, if this is in your pocket or something, you'll notice that it will not go off whatsoever. Well, that's because the 1911 design is designed with 2 external safeties. It has this, which is a grip safety. This has to be fully engaged for that trigger to go off. So if you'll look, we have this thing cocked right now and it will not go off whatsoever. I'm trying to make this thing go off. If it was in my pocket, something hit it, it will not go off. But if I push down on this grip safety, then the gun goes off. So it has to have 2 things going on for this to go off, which makes this one safer than the previous 4 that I've showed. This is probably the safest one out of all of them. So when you're carrying this around, and somebody's carrying around a 1911 and you see it in what they call the cocked and locked configuration here with the hammer back and the thumb safety on, rest assured that this gun is safe. It is not going to go off. There's nothing you can do to make this gun go off without taking off the safety and having your hand on this grip to make the, everything come together and work. Great gun, great trigger. You're never going to see one with a better trigger than a 1911. Now the reason I use this one is this is the only one that I own that has an ambidextrous safety on it. So if you look in the top view of it, there's a safety on each side of it, and they work in unison next to each other. And the reason that being is the original 1911 design only had a safety on this side. And when I just told you have to use a safety on a 1911, so if you were left-handed and you drew this out, you did not have this thing here to release the safety. You had to train yourself to come onto this side, or you had to learn how to shoot right-handed, which is not always an option. People don't have the greatest muscle memory, and not everybody can do things ambidextrous. So some of these newer manufacturers, they came out with these ambidextrous safeties where a left-handed shooter can shoot a 1911 and it will function fine. So you just draw it out and take the safety off with your left hand. Very easy to do. 1911 is a great option, and beyond popular belief, it is a very safe gun, and it is actually safer than pretty much any striker fire gun that I can think of because of all the safety features that's on the outside of it. Now we're going to move to the last one here. This is a Revolver. This is a Model 60 Smith & Wesson 38 Special, and a lot of people carry these. This is what they call a J-frame. A J-frame Smith & Wesson is a very popular carry gun, but if you'll look on the outside of this gun, there is absolutely no safeties on it whatsoever, and you don't hear people complaining about these not having safeties, and I'm going to show you why. So the way this works, this particular one, and this isn't true of all revolvers, this has a firing pin on the hammer. And when you pull the trigger on this thing, if you'll look here real close and in between the cylinder, you'll see the firing pin. And when I let off of my trigger, you'll see this hammer goes back and the firing pin is no longer exposed. So let's do that again. Let's pull this trigger and you'll see the firing pin goes in there, and that's what makes contact with the primer. We're going to release it, and that's how it's in the resting position. Now, if you hit this from behind, and I'm not going to beat on my gun here to show you, you cannot make this go in and hit the back of that primer. So that makes this very safe to carry. Now, when this is in the holster and you pull it out, your first pull is going to be double action, which is the same as that Sig. It's going to be a little bit heavy. You just pull on it, and that makes the firing pin go out. Now you can pull this thing back and cock it. This is a double action revolver also, so when you shoot it in single action, you'll notice how the trigger is way back. It's a very light pull, and you would never want to carry a revolver around cocked like this. There's actually no safeties on it whatsoever. It's so light, something got in here, it is going to make the gun go off. But a lot of people carry around revolvers, and a lot of people carry around these little small ones like this, and that's why I use this one as an example. But they are safe to carry even though there's no external safeties. So the bottom line is, there's a variety of different platforms. There's a variety of different ways to make safeties on guns, and whether you choose to use a safety or not use a safety is completely up to you. You need to assess what your risk tolerance is and what your training has given you the ability to do, and choose whether you can carry a Sig Sauer with virtually no safeties on it whatsoever, or all the way up to a 1911 and it has 2 external safeties on it. They all work the same. It's just all about training though, folks. If you're using this 1911, everybody that carries a 1911 or trains with the 1911 understands that the first thing you do when you draw out is take the safety off. That's the first thing you do with it. Everybody that uses a Sig Sauer P320 understands that you just pull it out and you use the most important safety here, which is your trigger finger and the thing that's between your ears, your brain. Nothing should enter this trigger guard until you're ready for this thing to go boom. So let me know what you think about safeties on different firearms, what you people use, if you're a thumb safety person, or if you're a no safety person. I happen to be a no safety person unless it's completely necessary, and the only one on this table I see it completely necessary for is this 1911 here. Let me know what you think, and thank you very much for watching my video today, and you folks have a great day.